Right, so now we're looking at understanding impact factors and profiling person behaviour. So at the moment, we're not looking at any known antecedents of the person intelligence. We're just looking at what's in front of us and what's instantly available. So if we look at these two pictures, for example, we've got an angry looking male and we've got an angry female. Now, between the two of them that we can see, there's only one actually showing some violence. So it's the little old lady. But if we think about the impact factors, which one is instantly the greater threat? So we'll come to that in a moment. But this is what we're going to have a look through now, because each impact factor will depend as well on your demographics, and plus things like what your physical shape is like, as in condition, how many of you as members of staff there are. So we've said about the heart rate issues earlier, and what we've got to think about here, the higher your heart rate, so if you've ran somewhere and now you're being confronted with something, or you've been having some physical use of force, if your heartbeat is high, you're going to lose more ability in relation to complex thinking. And so again, it's kicking in these natural and instinctive responses, these natural responses to things. So here we have a child, and this is an upset emotional child. So what is the risk in relation to this child to you? Now, based just on what we can see there, I would suggest it's not really too high a risk of what we can see there. There's always going to be a risk, but is it high at this point? Probably not. However, if we can step back and see a wider image in relation to what's there, now we see the gun. So again, there we only see part of the picture, and that might make us come to a decision that this is a low risk event. But when we see the larger picture, we now have an extremely high risk scenario, because we've got a child with an emotional brain with a gun in their hands, which we're going to have to assume is loaded and could go off at any moment, whether it's deliberate or not. So here we've got the person profile and the object instantly increases this lower risk threat to an extremely high risk threat because of the firearm that's now in his possession. So here we have two staff members to the right, and we have a muscular built patient stroke prisoner stroke detainee who's now got blood on them, probably from a self-harming event. So 1 against 2 members of staff against 1, but what's the profile issues here? So here we can take into consideration the physical presence of this person. So he's looking muscular. It's looking like a he. Then think about the 2 members of staff. They're not looking as muscular as that member of staff, but that I could be wrong in relation to that, but they're not looking as muscular. Also then, if this person has self-inflicted injuries to produce this blood, are they now in a severely high arousal state in that fight, flight, freeze method? And are they potentially suffering from some mental ill health event? So the risk there, even though there's 2 to 1, the risk there could easily be assessed as being very high to these 2 members of staff who are not in extreme high arousal. What about then the place issues? So we've got, on the left-hand side, we've got someone who's contained in a cell, and on the right-hand side, we've got an open area in relation to a ward. Now, one of the things in relation to cells is at times the necessity to even enter the cell. If the person is distressed within the cell and high arousal, then staff entering the cell, it's highly likely that there's going to be a physical event that's going to take place between the staff and the prisoner. So the question would have to be, is it necessary to even enter? If the prisoner is self-harming and there's a threat then to life, then yes, there's going to have to be some intervention in order to preserve life. But if the person isn't putting their own life at stake, where's the necessity to have to go into a cell and then in effect fight and use physical force? Now, in an open environment where we've got, for example, here and this ward area, the place gives us more risk because there's more chance of other staff members and or other patients being harmed as a result of this. Plus, what objects are there? It would be preferable to think there's no real objects that can do the harm in the cell in comparison to if you're on an open ward where they can get into other rooms and get items which they can then make weapons of as well. So when we're looking at the profiled person behaviour, one issue is about the person or persons, that's them and you. So you take your own demographics into account as well. What's the height difference between the two people, between you and them? What's the age difference between you and them? You know, as a 50-something-year-old woman now, the last thing I want to do is have a one-to-one with, say, a 21-year-old male who's physically presenting as a bodybuilder, who's also in a very high state of arousal, because based on a one-to-one physical strength, there's no comparison. So we need to take into consideration the person issues. Then objects, are objects involved? Because anything can be turned into a weapon. So if the person, in addition to whatever their profile is, also has an object. So at one end, that object could be a knife or a gun, or it could be a chair that they're holding, or anything at all could be that object, which is again, is it going to increase the risk and threat? Then the place, as we've said there, you've got to think about the place that you're at and how is that impacting in relation to the threat and risk assessments. And the presenting behaviours, because you might have a person there with a weapon in an open place, but they're being absolutely passive and just sitting there and wanting to talk. Therefore, your verbal de-escalation skills could potentially bring all of this to a calm and safe conclusion. So it's difficult to ever say something is a low risk. It can be a high risk, very high risk, or you might say something is a standard risk or an unknown risk, but it's really difficult to say that something is a low risk or no risk at all. It might be no known risk, but to say something is no risk could be dangerous because anyone at any time can go up that continuum of the arousal and into a fight, flight and freeze event. So then when we're looking at the kind of behaviour that they're presenting with, so regardless of their profile and the location and any weapon that they've got, then look at these issues. Compliance. The person offers no resistance and complies with requests. Bear in mind that this can change with little or no warning, but is the person being compliant even though they've got these presenting factors? Then next one up, we've got verbal resistance and gestures. The person verbally refuses to comply but physically complies. So they're saying, no, I don't want to, but all the time they're still walking along. So you've said, like, come on back to your room, and they're walking towards it, but verbally they're just saying, well, I don't want to go in. Passive resistance, the person refuses to move and remains in position but offers no physical violence. So you say to the person, come on back to your room, and they then just fold the arms, go, no, I don't want to go. So they're not actually offering you any threat, but they're resisting, they're passively resisting in relation to it. Active resistance, the pull or move away, but offer no violence. So you go, come on back to your room, and you happen to put your arm out as though you were going to shoo them along. And they instantly slap out to go, no, I'm not going, I'm not going. Aggressive resistance, so the person then turns around, just try putting your hands on me and you'll get it. Or they actually take a swing at you. And then aggravated resistance, they instantly start the attack. So regardless of the person profile, object and the place, we need to also consider the behaviour that's going on as well. So one thing to introduce you to is something called transactional analysis. Now, I was first introduced to this in 1994 when I was on the Home Office law trainers course. This was originally produced in the 1960s, and it's based on the assumption that people move between different ego states. And the three main ego states are parent, adult, and child. So then parent is split into two different states. We've got critical parent and nurturing parent. And then we've got adult, who is logical and rational. And then we have child, free child, or adapted child. So if you just think back and even into your own personal relationships, as an adult, some days you just feel a bit poorly, and you might then say to your other half, I feel a bit poorly, I've got a poorly head or whatever, and you adopt this adapted child kind of behavior, because then what you're seeking from that is a nurturing parent response. So then your partner offers reassurance, puts their arms around you, there scenario. And that then pacifies you and helps. But if you went, oh, I feel poorly, I've got a headache, but then your other half said, I don't care less, you've still got to do your chores and you've still got to do this, you'd be thinking like, So likewise, you at times will have clients, so your patients, prisoners, detainees, who go into the adapted child mode. Now, how to ignite this into an increase in arousal would be the critical parent. How to try and negate any further aggravation would be to go to a nurturing parent mode. Give them that TLC, verbal TLC that they're seeking. Then you can move into the adult phase of logical and rational, as in, you've given them some nurture, and then it's, but we have to still do this because it's the rules, because of this or because of that. But you've given them that little bit first of nurturing parent. Then you go to the rational, rather than you will do it because it is the rules. Because just by that non-verbal and the tone, it becomes a critical parent. The free child, this is where adults let loose for a little bit and have a run around, the giddy, the laughing, the playing, people go into a playful mode. And in many workplaces, you'll see this, where teams will have free child moments where everyone's having a bit of a laugh. And that's a natural state, an ego state for adults to go into. And again, there you need to then have that time to be able to go back up to the adult mode. And ideally, we get everyone back to adult mode, but people will go up and down throughout these three phases. So if we're considering tactical communications, we need to consider also the methodology of communication with the other person. So if a person's communicating to you in an adult ego state, they will receive a critical parent in a negative way. But a person starting in critical parent may respond to the adult. So one of your patients points out to you something negative, as in, I've been here waiting for 10 minutes. So they're being critical in relation to this. Now, if you then respond in a critical method back by saying such as, well, you're the prisoner, or you're the patient, I'm the staff, I was busy, you're going to get at loggerheads, and it's going to create problems. Where instead, if you go into the likes of either adapted child or logical and rational adult, there's less chance of it becoming a flashpoint. So an example here, staff member to patient says, it's time for you to go to your room and be a bit quicker tonight. I've not got all night to waste on you. So that's a critical parent mode. So the patient then says, oh, but I don't want to go yet. Please, can I just stay and watch this for 5 more minutes? They've gone into adapted child. Staff member says, go now or we'll take you in a restraint. Critical parent response. So then the patient goes straight from adapted child into challenge, try it. Staff member, okay, assistance required. So then we've gone from a very simple ask of saying it's time for lockup, it's time to go to your room, to now there's a physical intervention, restraint, and potential assault on staff as well. Whereas if, for example, the staff member had said it's time to go to your room and just left it at that, rather than adding that extra bit in and be a bit quicker tonight, I've not got all night to waste on you, just it's time to go to your room. And then the patient says, oh, but I don't want to go yet. Please, can I just stay and watch this for 5 minutes? If the staff member then, for example, just said, sorry, you can't, you've got to go now, there's less chance then of it being a flashpoint. So when we look at possible links to preferred methodologies, critical parent mode is a mode that activists can quickly go to. So I'm not saying activists do always, but it's a mode that a lot of activists find easy to get to. Nurturing parent, they're quite common traits in reflector personalities. Adult mode is a common one for a pragmatist. Adapted child could be a good one for a theorist, and free child, well, anyone can go into free child at any point here. And again, these are not written in stone, they're flexible, and they're not going to be an accurate theory for everyone. But it's just being aware of, if you think back to how some events where, for example, a clash point has happened and there's been either a standoff or force used, if we think about the conversation or behaviours which happened on the run up to that, can you see perhaps how conversations went and how the behaviour then spiralled with that, and how maybe you could have said or done, or the other people could have said or done things differently in order then to reduce the chance of conflict. So here's an example. This young man is hanging over his desk, doesn't look too happy. Staff member says, sit up straight and stop being a pain. That's critical parent. So this young man here says, I'm really upset and angry. So he's in adapted child mode. So staff member, if you don't sit up, I'll get another member of staff and we'll take you out. Critical parent. Patient then kicks the chair back, pushes the table forward. Staff then end up restraining the person. So other options around this, staff member, come on, sit yourself up straight, please. So instead of it being critical like that, you're in an adult stroke parent mode. He then says, I'm really upset and angry. Staff member then, why? Yeah. What's happened? Do you want to talk about it? At least then hopefully we're not flaming the fire. And then back to these two then. So if I was looking at these two now, I'm confronted with these two people. So I look at my demographics and think, female 50s, I'm past my physical peak. Also, as we age, we lose bone density strength. So particularly women, we can start losing bone density from about the age of 30. And then menopause and postmenopause also rapidly increases that decrease in bone density. So me looking at the chap on the right, I'm thinking he's male. He appears to be a few years younger than me. Am I going to come off well in this? No, not really. Do I want to get into a physical intervention between me and him? No, not unless I have to. So if I look at the threat of the old lady, she's the one who's actually showing the fist. But do I feel the same threat from her? No, because I'm younger and hopefully fitter than she is. And even though she's showing a fist, her face isn't given the same anger as the man on the right. So all of this is relevant to your statements then in relation to your decision-making process. And when we look at the decision-making models, what you see and what you feel, your gut instinct is still all true in relation to your mindset for what you then decide to do. And our next input will be about understanding triggers.